do. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Speaking Legally with Legal Meets Cultural with your legal experts, Edward Pichardo Esquire and Royce Russell Esquire. My name is Dr. Stacey Grant. I have the privilege of producing this show every week, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we thank you for being here, being a part of the show, engage with the conversation, sharing the conversation so that we can empower our communities, take action over the things that you can't control, and then understand some of the other pieces of the world that are happening. So we have a full show for you today, a lot to talk about. I know everybody has a buzz about what's happening with the governor of New York, but there's other news that we'll also be sharing and getting into today and doing our best to give you not legal advice, air quotes, but a perspective for you to refer to as you learn the facts about what we look at in the law and how that affects our community. So, with that being said, over to Erra Picharo Esquire for a quick hello, and then over to Senor Russell, and then we will get started with the show. And hey, John, thank you for tuning in.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to our show this afternoon. Great to have you here today. Once again, my name is Ed Pichardo. Glad to have you. Buenas tardes, todo el mundo. Buenas tardes, comunidad, familia. Gracias por venir esta tarde.
Gracias. And Mr. Russell.
Welcome, everybody. We have a lot to share, so I'm ready to share it. So let's get it on.
Yeah.
Awesome. So before we start, we always acknowledge when an ancestor has transitioned. That's something culturally that we all know is important to us, that we just don't stand and do the things that we do on our own, but we're blessed to have people who came before us. And in the news, we are mourning the loss of another giant. For those of you that have heard, or you might not be familiar, you will learn today about Johnny Ventura, who is the modern, what they call the Elvis of merengue. So, Ed, I know this is very personal to you and even your mom about this legend that passed. So, you want to share a little bit about our dearly departed Johnny Ventura?
No question. Johnny Ventura. I grew up listening to him, and it was my mom who actually called me up to inform me that he had passed away, and I was like blown away. I was like, wow, even at his advanced age, he was still performing, and when it comes to Latino people and Latinos, a lot of time, folks, don't think of, looking at this tall black man and saying, wow, he's like, yeah, definitely. This brother was what they call the Elvis of merengue. He had over 100 albums. But to let you know, he wasn't just an entertainer. People need to understand that this gentleman was studying to be an architect even before he became a celebrity. And even after he became a celebrity, years later, he still had this fervor for knowledge and education and ended up getting his law degree in the Dominican Republic. And he was also the mayor of Santo Domingo, the capital of the Dominican Republic. And my understanding is he entertained running at one point for the presidency. I'm not sure about that one, but, he was a legend. He was a giant. Whenever he spoke eloquently. He had an extensive collection. He also composed and wrote songs that were sung by other artists. I was listening this Sunday to this show where this gentleman, this DJ named Coco Cabrera, was performing many of his hits from, I believe, 4 to 6 when he ends the show. It comes on every Sunday for several hours from 1 to 6. And at the end of the show, he was shedding tears and crying on air. And, this guy will be sorely missed. My mom used to go see him walking to his performances because they grew up in the same area in the Dominican, in Santo Domingo called Villa Juana. So she would talk about how she would see him walking to a certain place where he would go to perform, and how he was really close to his mom, and she would wait for him to come out of his performances so he wouldn't be walking home alone and stuff. And there's definitely there a connection. I've been listening to him for ages, and I actually have an anniversary album sitting here in
Wow.
my crib on wax. That's like about 35 years old, and at the time, it was an anniversary collection. So you can just imagine, this gentleman's discography. So, definitely a legend worthy of mention. May you rest in power.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing that and just giving a little personal perspective to another one of our ancestors, because it's information to know, and a lot of people are dance the merengue and they love the music and they don't know, who was really behind it. And the fact that he was pursuing this law career and then ended up with music as the forerunner for what he is known for. That was definitely an interesting fact. So thank you for sharing that, and definitely rest in power, Johnny Ventura. So, Grant, thank you for showing up on the show as well and tuning in. Now we're going to transition into some of the hot topics that are going on, particularly in the New York City area. And we know we have folks tuning in from all over, but eyes are always on New York City just because, we're so nice. They named us twice. And because of that, people are always watching what happens here, because as it goes in New York, there goes most of the rest of the country. So, vaccinations are top of mind for many people. And we've been talking about, even on this show, what's really going to happen. There's been such a push about getting vaccinated and what are we going to do? We even had a show about the human resources perspective when it comes to, do you have a choice of going back to work? We spent a considerable amount of time on where your rights, quote unquote, as an employee stand, and what it means to look in your employee handbook and know what your employer can say. But now New York City is instituting a couple of different things rather quickly around requiring proof of vaccination to enter restaurants, fitness centers, and apparently that even expanded today. What do my legal experts have to say about this? We'll come over to you first, Mr. Russell.
Well, I can tell you that most of the things that we talked about early on in our show was folks having the right to file a lawsuit. And it was much argument and discussion about people should have the right to do what they want to do, and how dare any employer say that you must do this or you must do that. Well, I think the verdict has already come down. People are going to have to get the vaccine if they want to work. And you can file all the lawsuits you want. I'm just being a realist. And as a lawyer, I need to manage people's expectations and give them the understanding of whether or not you're going to be successful or not. And this is my personal opinion that, yeah, you can file a lawsuit saying that my company is forcing me to do something and that's violating my civil rights. But behind the scenes and reading in between the lines, the courts don't even want to hear it. Everybody wants to be safe. Everybody wants to see tomorrow. And if you're an employee and you work in a restaurant or you work for the state or for the city, you're going to have to fall in line. And the proof of vaccination is going to happen. I mean, look, a person of color knows and can see when there is an impingement on rights and when there is something that we need to do to keep the world safe. So I harken back to 9/11. People of color were not, faced to the floor and cracked when there was extra security at the airports and you had to be searched, because we were searched twice, 3 times already. That's just the reality of what our life looked like. It was other folks, people that weren't of color, white folks, progressive folks, that were just like, oh my God, now you're impinging upon, now you're going to search me, and now you're going to do this, and now I can't bring my luggage, and I can't bring my spray cologne, and it's for national security reasons. You can't do it. And if this is not national security, I don't know what is, because it is taking out people left and right. I have a friend or two that work in the healthcare industry, and they are saying that they are running into patients that are saying, now, can you please give me the vaccine shot, when they got COVID? Now, here's the ignorance behind that. Not that you're going to get the shot after you got it, but the shot kind of introduces you to it anyway. So now you're getting double dose of it to try to fight it off, right? And so when we look at where the law is going, or where the states and cities are going, it's going to be mandated. And it's unfortunate that it has to come down to that, because you would like to give people discretion to manage themselves in the most appropriate way, right? You have a child who is, 17 or 15, you treat them one way. When they're 17, you treat them another way. When they're 21, you treat them another way. But if they don't take the discretion and use it properly, you got to take someone that's 20, 25 and treat them like they're 15. And so there's going to be a lot of people that's going to get treated like they're 15.
And just to expand on, what Royce is saying, because we talked about this, I believe the last show before, or the show, last, in terms of where the Supreme Court stands on, whether or not there, a vaccine mandate is legal or not. It's clear that if there's a threat posed to the general public, and a mandate has to be imposed to deal with that threat, and back in that day, it was smallpox. Now you got this COVID-19 pandemic. So we talked about restaurants, gyms, fitness centers, etc. Just to be clear, also in recent days, as Dr. Grant mentioned, this stuff is moving very rapidly. You have Biden announcing it for federal workers who work on site, and visitors as well, which I believe the visitors really speak to the federal contractors. So basically what they have to do is they have to attest that they have received the vaccine, and I would imagine that's under penalty of perjury, or submit to test, mask, and social distancing mandates. New York's governor, back on July 28th, he said state-run hospitals, and that got expanded 2 days ago to all MTA and Port Authority employees, vaccine or testing, increased testing, repeated testing, submission to testing starting Labor Day. I was only, as to the mayor, with the indoor dining, gyms, and performances, I'm not sure if we mentioned that, performances, what I couldn't find an executive order for that, or even the New York City Health and Hospitals Corporation workers. But I did find an executive order number 75, which is mandatory vaccination requirement for new hires, which is clearly delineated, and it talks about an individual is considered fully vaccinated 2 or more weeks following the receipt of the second dose in a 2-dose series, or 2 weeks or more following receipt of 1 dose of a single dose COVID-19 vaccine, i.e. I would imagine the only one that falls into that category currently right now in the United States is the Johnson & Johnson. And so that executive order specifically targets those who have been newly hired by the city. Now, I'm not sure if an executive order just came out on those employees, because normally when you get hired by the city, you go through some sort of probationary period. And I'm not sure if they have clear grievance rights under the union's rules. So
wait. We all know that when you're on probation, you have no rights. You're not even no. You're on probation. You're on probation. You in that catch-22 period where nobody's really trying to protect you because you ain't pay enough dues. Let's just keep it. We ain't even talking legal. You haven't paid enough dues to get protection, right? And we don't even know if you're going to stay.
Well, I'm not. The reason why I'm not endorsing that blanket assertion, because I know there's some small provisions in some collective bargaining agreements where that employee has at least a smidgen of a right when it comes to maybe certain things or a certain level of consideration.
Look, I understand
even during a probationary period.
I understand exactly.
But you're generally right. I would say you're generally right.
And I understand exactly what you're saying, and I just want to make sure that there are people that will follow that writing that's on paper, but in reality, nobody's standing up for you. That is reality. No one is looking out for you.
And just to educate the audience, what I'm talking about is when you first get hired in most of these jobs, even though there's a union in place and they're taking out the union dues, there's an agreement between the employer, the union, that you have to go through some sort of, usually it's a 60 to 90 day period where you can be treated to a certain degree at will. Meaning that, time and attendance, you can't be fired. You start missing days, something happens.
Well,
you start
at will mean
or without a reason, rather.
Yeah, without a reason. That's right. Without a reason.
So
that's right.
Let's get down to the nitty gritty.
That's right. Without a reason.
Let's not sugarcoat it.
Let's not play no games with you. But check it out. This is the reality. Here you come, right? Not you personally, but the person popping off about, I don't want to get a vaccinated. I want to. And you on that 90-day period, you know what happens. I mean, one of the things about this show, we don't call it Keep It Real Speaking Legally. We call it Speaking Legally. And we happen to keep it real while we're speaking. Right?
And we also tell you what they call the dealio.
You know what I mean? You can change the name, as long as the mission is the same. And so I think the next tackle is going to be the Board of Ed, right? Teachers having to do this stuff.
And
how does that fall out?
And listen, and to be honest with you, I don't even understand, because it's already in the public health law that in order for a child to attend, public school, that they have to be immunized. For instance, it's in the public health law section 2164 that there has to, that child has to be shown to be immune from like about I think it's like 10, 12.
Yeah, you got the chicken pox, you got the measles, you got a whole bunch of
poliomyelitis, mumps, measles, diphtheria, rubella, varicella, homophilus influenza, type B, pertussis, tetanus, pneumococcal, all sorts of stuff. So so people, as I mentioned in the show earlier, I think about the only legal rope that people are trying to hold on to in terms of those who don't want to be mandated are that that right now all of these vaccines are being done under some sort of emergency authorization, and not a full FDA approval. But
and we've discussed that there's been
but I think with the rise of this this Delta variant and the increased risk that's being posed to the general public, that courts aren't even going to tolerate that defense eventually. So
well, you ain't even got to worry about eventually. We've seen it in Texas, we've seen it in Arizona. They struck that down. Like, not that New York or any other place is following suit, but once you strike out, people use that as the litmus test to go on to say, all right, this is how we're going to defeat this. And it's no doubt that it's going to be defeated. And so you can exercise it, right? And then you got to look at people who's going to take on this type of litigation. Who's taking on this litigation, right? Who's defending the rapist? Who's defending the child molester? I know, and I take it to that extreme because there are people that don't want to get caught in it. This is clearly a case of an agency, the CDC, in some sense, putting out information and putting out instructions and trying to be flexible. And then a bunch of other people that are hearing, that's us, hearing this information, that suffer from, if you're a person of color, mistrust, because you know what's happened in the past as far as vaccination and our people, mistrust for folks that are not people of color because of the political climate, and I want to exercise this right and that right and the other right, and then misinformation, based whether it's social media or whether it's the Russians or you name it, that put information out there, and people don't do their due diligence because they saw it on the internet, and then this craving that things have to be very fixed and not fluid, that the CDC can't change his mind because they see something different. If you're a coach and you coach your team, for those that look at sports, you may go walk into the game with a game plan, but something happens that make you change. If you're a parent, you might want to parent a certain way, but then you have a kid that doesn't really adhere to your parenting because for whatever reason, and this ideology that, get it right. You got to get it right. No, this thing is moving. We may never get it right. We may only get it
Yeah,
right in
I,
pieces.
I agree. It's fluid, and just to be clear to folks, every one of these, so-called requirements, mandates, always has some exception to it in terms of, if you are able to provide a credible reason, health-wise, well documented from a physician saying, well, I can't take it because, but the other side of that is then you have to submit to increase and repeated testing,
Testing, and that's not fun.
masking,
That's
social
not fun.
distance. So you got to pick your poison, baby, and figure out what you gonna do in terms of, if you genuinely listen, I got it well documented here. Any vaccines that I have taken in the past, my arm blows up, or I get really sick, or I'm immunocompromised, so I can't. That's one thing, and it mentions reasonable accommodations and all of those, but that also comes, and we talked about that previously, that comes with its own dynamics that you have to be prepared to deal with. So the reality of it is at the end of the day,
You may have to fall in line.
Yeah, this
You
is
may have to fall in
simply
line.
creating an
You
atmosphere
may
of
have to
increased
fall in line.
pressure where those who have been holding out will have
fall in line.
Yeah,
And not only that, Ed, we take it one step further. Here's the legal part of it, right? Here's the legal part that we throw our arms up in the air.
Mm-hmm.
And this is keeping it real part.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm an employer, go ahead, go sue me. Spend your money litigating. Go ahead, do it.
Well, listen, I will say this, Royce. I will mention this. Some weeks back, I read an article about a particular law firm that is actually taking on these cases, because you always got that firm, right, that wants to represent a particular constituency group of people. And they've been actually suing certain entities regarding mandates, requirements, and have stopped certain municipality or government agencies somewhat in their tracks. And that's where I mentioned that emergency authorization. Most of them are trying to hang their hat on that, or if the requirement or mandate isn't well written or well done in a way where it's not perceived
I
as
mentioned
discriminatory or not providing an out for someone who has a legitimate health reason. But once you cover those bases, I can't see where there's any other legal ability to stop employers from implementing these practices, cities from trying to keep their populace safe, especially when you have these growing numbers of infections by the primarily unvaccinated.
Well, that's why I started out by saying you can sue all day and all you want. If the social agenda, behind the scenes agenda, is to kill these type of lawsuits, then they're going to be killed. And you can appeal it all day. And you can have legal representation for free. But what are you doing for income? Is that law firm providing the money? Yeah. I hear crickets. Yes, that's exactly what's happening. You'll be standing there by yourself with a lawsuit, out of a job. Yeah, can you run that by again? You just happen to have it right on too. That's what you call on time, and that's what will happen. And so I commend the firms for doing it. Clap, 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 and clap. But the reality is that Verizon bill got to get paid, cable, cell phone, etc. And a lot of people cannot fight that battle. I'm not saying that you shouldn't. I'm just saying, keeping it real on speaking legally, you might want to adjust yourself.
Or rather, when keeping it real goes wrong. Huh?
Yeah, right. Exactly.
So that's that being said, as we wrap up this part, it's funny you mentioned the lawsuits, because the Biden vaccination, what he's coming out with, there's an article that was just released about the lawsuits. Like everybody's prepping for the onslaught of lawsuits. So, we definitely will keep you posted as what's going on and what's happening. Hey, Mo. Good to see you on the show, my brother. So now we're switching gears. Vaccinations. We've talked about your personal preference on whether you want to do it. It's becoming beyond personal now with all of these mandates. So you really might want to consider what you're going to do, what you and your family are going to do if you have not made that decision yet. It's not going away, and we're going to see more and more legislation across the country, not just in New York, in regards to this, because numbers are peaking with those who aren't vaccinated. I feel that people got a little too comfortable in the summer, so we're hoping that we're not in a situation that looks very similar to last fall. I hope everyone uses wisdom as they move around and ultimately stay safe. It's the bottom line. We want you to be safe.
And Dr.
Now,
Graham, before you go on, here's just real briefly. Would you go in a restaurant and none of the employees have masks on, none of the employees are vaccinated, and they're cooking your food? See, we could talk about health, we could talk about this, we could talk about the auto mechanic, we could talk about restaurants is a big part of the income in the city. You're not going to that restaurant. And if I'm the owner of that restaurant, I need customers to come in. I'll let you sleep on that. You can sleep on that. We'll come back to that next week. We'll come back to that next Wednesday. Next
when
Wednesday.
you said that made me feel like
Yes. Yes.
That would be me if I was a restaurant owner. But I'm just saying, I tell you, it's a lot. We were ahead of the curve here on Speaking Legally. We were talking about this because we saw what was coming, and we also saw what was coming back in March, Ed, when
Yes.
we started talking about this next story, because it's been a little quiet for some news outlets, but now we're right back in the center of the news with Governor Cuomo getting this state attorney general report with multiple sexually harassed women.
Now, at the time that we were talking about this back, I believe it was the March 17th show, which I would welcome folks to look at. We were talking about actually just, I believe, 7 women. And this report that came out yesterday reveals that number got expanded to 11 during this investigation. Now, just so folks understand, Attorney General Tish James was empowered by the office of the governor based on an executive law to do an investigation of these allegations. And so she turned around and hired attorneys from a law firm or law firms, 2 of them in particular, leading, I guess, a team of other legal counsel to interview witnesses, interview the complainants, look for corroboration. So what is corroboration? Somebody says, he did this. Well, what proof have you? Have you spoken to anybody about this? Is there anything in writing? Was anything reported? Was anything documented? Were there any observations by someone else verifying basically what it is that you're claiming? And apparently when you read this report, which is about, correct me if I'm wrong, Royce, about 168 pages.
It's exactly 168
Yeah, I got through about maybe 6 of them. Interesting reading, very thorough report. Oh my gosh. I mean, I've been a lawyer for over 20 years. I've seen reports, I've seen investigations. I got to say, this is one of the most thorough ones I've ever seen. Footnotes and all, very detailed notes, very detailed accounts, almost no stones left unturned, quite frankly. Expansion of complainants based on the investigation, which is always kind of, like, wow, you were investigating one thing and then other things came up during that investigation. That's, so, this investigation has been completed, documentation and all. I think that it mentions about 10 to 70,000 documents reviewed over the course of these months that this investigation has been taking place. And so, oh my gosh. So
I mean, one of the things we've talked about, even when we did the presentation about guns, the other couple of series ago, and we talked about being a defense counsel, right? Because this is all about his defense now, right? They're already criticizing his defense. I think his PR people have put out pictures of him kissing thousands and hugging thousands of people. It just so happens that the demographics of those people are like 89 and above, right? Or 10 years old or less, right? So you got him kissing babies and minors, and then you got to kissing the elderly, and you may as well put parade behind each one of these pictures, because there's usually some event that's going on. It's not what this report is really talking about. When we're in the back room and we're walking from room A to room B, or I call you to my office and we're negotiating, or haven't seen you in a long time, and I'm doing things that is not within the norm. I've always said this: if you're a robber and you rob someone, and then you rob someone, and you rob someone, you rob someone, and then you rob someone, and you rob someone, and all those victims come to court, 11 of them, I can probably knock out 2 of them. On the day that I eat my cornflakes, Wheaties, Frosted Flakes, Raisin Bran, I probably get to 3 of them. But the other 8 rings of truth. The other numbers, rings of truth, no matter how you do it, because if you hear it over and over again, your ability to discard it diminishes.
And just to be clear on legally, because one of the things that people have to understand here is it's not a subjective analysis of sexual harassment, hostile environment. It's not about whether or not the individual being investigated or being looked at gets to say, well, this is my cultural norm,
right?
And that other person has to submit to that. That's what I want folks to understand. Right now, the governor's defense is not really a cognizable legal defense. It's about whether or not that complainant felt uncomfortable with the exchange. That's what it's really about.
They have yet to title his defense, but I'm gonna give it a title. It's called a coach defense. And what do I mean by that? If you're a coach in sports, you usually pat people on the butt. Good job, Pat. Good job, Pat. Well, you can't have that as a defense here. You can't say, hey, man, I was once a coach, so I just tap people in the behind when they do a good job, or I just rub them in inappropriate areas when they do a good job. You can't have that. And as you said, it's not up to you to dictate what's appropriate and what's inappropriate, especially the allegations of going beyond the waistband of females.
Yeah.
And areas that is. There's always an air of truth somewhere.
And we have to, and listen, for all my Italian brothers and sisters, I want you to be careful when you look to embrace what's being put forth as a defense, because most of the folks that I know that are of Italian ancestry don't engage in the conduct that I've been reading in this report. And I welcome folks, please read the report. The report is online. It's not like you have to go and climb a mountain and then decipher the combination to some sort of lockbox after you get to the underneath the volcano. That's not what we're talking about here. I was able to type up AG report Cuomo, and I was able to find it, and I was able to download it, and I sat down there with some chips and I was reading it for a little bit. And you can do the same. And when you go through it, then you say to yourself, listen, is this type of conduct that is somehow I mean, listen, I'm Latino. We normally, when we see each other, we give a quick hug, maybe a kiss on the cheek, or whatever. Fine. That's not what people are talking about here. These women are talking about something beyond that. If it was just that, I don't think that would be the issue. And folks need to understand that before you start saying, oh no, and to take a moment,
the reason why most people are saying oh no, or may fall into the category of saying oh no before they read the report, is because they like the person that they know of.
Yeah.
They like the leadership that he has shown in a time of crisis. They like the things that they like, right? And some people will say, and we all know this is as human as we get, right? I don't like that. I don't like someone's bedside manner, but they're a great doctor. I don't like his bedside manner, but he's a great lawyer. I don't like this, but he's a great And so when you hear this comments, it's like, oh, well, leave him alone, because you had hinted off screen that you've heard some people like, why are they bothering him? And some people of a particular gender and of a particular color that you would be surprised and shocked. And you're like, well, because it's really not about him. It's about the victims. Put him aside. You know what I mean? It's about the victims. And when you focus on the victims, then you see where the chips lie. One of the sad things well, not sad, one of the most revealing things that's going to happen is that who of the politicians are going to have the courage to stand up and say, we got to do the right thing, and understand that their careers might be in jeopardy.
Yeah, and you know, it's interesting you mentioned that, because a number of elected officials were saying, listen, we got to wait to see what this investigation reveals before we go ahead and make a statement. You know, some were, you know, came out right out the gate and say, hey, listen, he needs to resign. And even on this show, when we were talking about this subject, we said, well, we're going to have to see what this report yields. And so now we have a report. And it's interesting because yesterday during the press conference, the reporters kept asking, well, AG, are you now going to pursue these as legal matters or as lawsuits against the governor, et cetera? Are you going to engage in some sort of criminal investigation? Because the AG does have, you know, some power to investigate, prosecute, right? And she said, no, the report is here. This is where we stop, and we let the other institutions do what they are designed to do.
Hold on. Let's keep it real right there. Let's stop right there.
Okay.
I think that she did the right thing by saying it, but I would be remiss if we all know that we are talking about politics.
Yeah.
And so it might be in her best interest not to get involved in any criminality and any lawsuit, because for strategic purposes, not personal, strategic purposes, you don't want this to become, well, she has a vendetta against me. So I think that was wise to say, let other agencies do that.
But I think there's even something more fundamental than even that. I think we need to look at the separation of powers doctrine here. You have the executive, you have the legislature, and you have the judiciary. Okay, they did the investigation. The AG, which is a state elected official, did the investigation, came out with a report. Now you got to allow the other branch of government to go ahead and do what they do. I think it would have even been just inappropriate as the AG to then try to seek the removal of the governor in this instance, or to move against the governor. I think what she did was completely appropriate and not supported, because now it falls to the legislature. And by the way, as I mentioned previously, if the assembly approves impeachment, which it has the power to do by a majority, that then moves over to the High Court of Impeachment, I believe it's referred to, in the Senate. And in the Senate, it's not just the senators who vote. It's the 7 members of the New York State Court of Appeals. So the reason why I mention that is because I mentioned the 3 branches of government: executive, legislative, judiciary. The judiciary, the core of the judiciary, the head of the judiciary, and I believe you'll agree with this, Royce, is that Court of Appeals, right?
Right. Who looks like him and sounds like him. But
now, of course,
who looks like him and sounds like him. But
now, the reason why my learned
I'm keeping it real, but
saying that is because if you recall, Dr. Grant, on that show, I mentioned that all 7 of those folks were appointed by the governor.
That's right.
So, but as I said previously, I would imagine that those 7 jurists would not allow the fact that they were appointed by the governor.
Now let's stop. Let's stop. Stop.
Wait, time out.
Stop. Dr. Grant, stop everything. Because you know what's happening here, Ed? You're moving those 3 cards too quickly, and I can't find the red piece. You're moving it. I feel like I'm on
I don't know what
42nd
you're
Street.
talking
I
about.
feel like I'm on 42nd
I don't
Street,
Oh,
know
here
what
we
you
and
go.
got.
you are moving it. You are moving
Oh,
it
okay.
fast. I mean, your
Push a
hands
pin
are
in it.
really
Hold on.
fast. So
Mr.
I
Russell,
want to
I know
slow it
he's
down.
moving
Wait,
fast.
Dr. Grant, let's slow it down so we can see Ed's hands move slowly. And
So
so what
we're going to let
Ed
him move
is
it in slow
saying,
motion.
what Ed is saying is that there's a possibility, although, as Monica said, integrity, courage, and all those things, there's a possibility that we might see that as the smoke screen of what's going on. People saying the right thing. People, it's almost as if we get on this show and I wink at you and Ed and say, you know what, today I'm going to be outraged. Right? Like, come on, like Royce, like for real, you're going to be outraged today. Like, we know the plan. I'm not saying we don't know the plan, but speaking legally, we usually ahead of the time and around the corner, ahead of the curve. So let me just put my chip down and plant it right here. There is a high possibility that all the things that Ed said may happen. The Senate says, yeah. The House said, ho. He says, he. We say, whoa. Shine a light on it. The whole thing. And then it goes to these people that God knows that Ed and I don't want any case to go to these people that got to do anything with plaintiff getting any type of money or anything with any place anywhere in the world, because it usually doesn't shine a good light on us. Usually it goes to our detriment. Now it goes to these group of people that are appointed by this man, who we don't see their names and we don't know their faces. See, when I don't know your name and I don't know your face, it's easy for you to say no. It's easy for you to say yes, because I don't see you. I don't get a chance to touch you. I'm not going to see you at a conference. I may not even know who you are. The majority of people don't even know who you are. But then when you got people that are DAs, that's head of house, that go to black caucuses, that go to places, the DC caucus, and I could touch you and I could see you, then I can start questioning you. And I can start putting your back up against the wall and say, where were you on that day in 1952? Did you step to the left or did you step to the right? You know what I mean?
Well,
What did you do? Were you hustling? Were you doing the cha-cha? What were you doing when you stepped to the left and you stepped to the right? And so it is important. That is the most important piece of this whole maybe conversation, that there may be a group of people at the end of the day, when everybody says it's a strike, they may say, no, it's not a strike. It's outside of the zone. And we can never
I don't
touch
want
those people.
I don't want to lose that. I want to push a pin in it, because you said the 3 cards, you couldn't find the red piece. Look, we're gonna get back to that because that's major. And I think for our show, we're always educating so that everybody understands the 3 branches of government and how it works here in New York. So they need to be aware of that when feelings come into play versus the law and how this will play out. But I don't want one point that you made earlier, Mr. Russell, to be lost on the fact that the victims get victimized twice in these situations, right? Because then it's all this questioning of whether they're telling the truth or they're not telling the truth.
Right.
And this,
Right.
I don't want that to get lost, because it is a very hurtful thing for someone to be in that position. And that's why it took so long for women. And I will say there are men who are victimized as well, but for women to come forward when something happens, because you get victimized all over again. So we all just need to be conscious and watch how we discuss and how we share, because we never know what could trigger an emotional response for people who are already going through a lot of trauma in our community. So I just wanted to circle back on that point that you made and just make sure that we as a community watching the show and you're sharing it out, that we don't let that get lost. Now, going back to the nice civic lesson that Mr. Pichardo gave us, it's going to be interesting to see what happens next in all 3 branches of government. I want to shout out Kevin. Thank you so much for being here. Hey, Monica. Thank you. Yes. And Monica, this is important for us to tell this and to speak it. We have a platform. We have to be responsible with the platform. Maria, thank you for tuning in. Rich and Mo, thank you also for being here and sharing your thoughts, because we don't want to be in a position where we see politics come before people. And that's what we're concerned about. When you're watching this, try to remove your personal biases according to whatever you think, and think about what's really happening. This is a report that is 100, almost 200 pages. I pulled up the screenshot so that you yourself can go and look with a critical mind, analytical mind, read it for yourself and see what's there before you continue conversations around what should or shouldn't happen, because the AG's office did their job. They have now punted it to the next branch of government to do what they need to do. Let's see what that branch of government does and then where it goes. That's what we're tracking here, is where the legal meets the cultural.
And
How is this playing
I'm
out?
more interested in not those that speak up, those that don't speak up.
Mm.
Well, I think one thing that I do want to mention here is that this report has now been made public and completed, right, by the AG. Now, in the assembly, there is an independent investigation, or an investigation, let's say,
An investigation, right.
taking place by the Judiciary Committee in the assembly. That's what Speaker Hasty committed to months ago. The question is going to be whether or not they decide to just go ahead and adopt the AG report, or whether they're going to do a re-interview of these witnesses, do their own investigation separate and apart, because they don't have to do that. They can go ahead and say, you know what, we went through the AG's report, it sounds good to us, we're going to present it to the majority of the assembly members and let them decide for themselves whether they're going to vote for impeachment and to move this to the Senate. So that's going to be very interesting.
And what's your forecast on that? If you had to forecast, would they go for impeachment and say we adopt this report, or what history has shown you, or let's continue with our investigation, which takes another 6 to 8 months, and the man is in power for another 6 to 8 months while they do their own investigation under the guise of being thorough, right? We didn't just take some, because they're in a catch-22 situation. If they just adopt the AG's report, there's a lot of people that's going to say, oh, you just adopted the AG's report, you didn't do anything independent. That'll be part of his defense. If they do their own investigation, then it'll be like, what's taking so long? You do your own investigation. It's not a good situation to be in.
Okay,
So
let me tell you what I think. One of the things that the assembly has to decide, and this is something for the legislative branch, is missing from the New York State Constitution is language that is in the U.S. Constitution. I don't know if you all recall, during the Donald Trump impeachment proceedings, you heard this phrase called high crimes and misdemeanors.
Right.
That language is absent from the New York State Constitution. Okay. So the legislature, and by the way, only one governor in the history, I believe there's been 56 governors in the history of the state of New York, only one has been impeached. A governor by the name of Sulzer, I believe. Back, early in the 20th century, maybe 1913, something like that. That's the only governor that's been removed. And so, but even then, they may look at those proceedings to maybe try to decide what historical standards have been in place to decide the fitness of a governor, or what the standard is for removal. But
prolong his tenure.
Well, I think what they're gonna do is they're gonna try to come up with some sort of standard by which they come up with before they put it to a vote to the members. I think that's something that they have to. They may rely on scholars, legal scholars, experts, those who are experts in the New York State Constitution, the history of it, and the history of this particular language, and these, because there is some history to look at, by the way. There were attempts to insert that language in previous New York State constitutions, and it didn't make it. It wasn't successful, and it's very hard, obviously, to.
Well, then your phone should be ringing right now, because we are long. No, brother. We are long ahead of the curve. You can't tell me those folks in Congress did not see this coming, right? You need to be stacking.
You mean in the state legislature?
That's right, the legislature. You need to be stacking up this shit. Hey, is going to look into this, and this is what we're going to do, because if this report comes down this way, we got to move swiftly to do something.
Well, I just mentioned that to say maybe they have completed that already. Maybe they have.
Maybe.
So but I just want to mention that is something that you're going to probably see before that's put to a vote, before they decide, if they decide that they're going to adopt this report. I have a hard time seeing them doing the job all over again. It would have been maybe a little different if this report wasn't this thorough.
Well,
okay, if this report was lacking, then you might have a basis for saying, "Oh, we have to do our own independent investigation."
But I'm looking at a different scripture. You're looking at the scripture of thoroughness and perfection. I'm looking at the scripture of save my ass and human reaction. That's the scripture I'm looking at. And that scripture tells me that if Como has the juice that he has, then he could squeeze people to say, look, why don't you have them do another investigation? This gives me some time here. Why don't you do? And look, I'm not that trusting like you are. Maybe you are. It's not that people look at a report and say, yeah, we're going to go with this, so let's roll with this.
Well, it's not about, to me, it's not even about trusting. At the time that we were talking about impeachment, just to remind the audience, it was also the month of the woman. Okay, let's keep that in mind here, right?
Yeah.
The lieutenant governor right now is a woman, Kathleen Hochul. Okay, and I believe she's even come out against the governor. This was an investigation that was done by the AG, who's a
unfortunately
woman. You have the head of the Senate right now, Andrea Stewart-Cousins, who's a woman.
Hillary Clinton is not president, and we rely on women for that to happen.
I think people are taking a very fresh look at how women are treated in the workplace. These were state workers.
I don't deny that.
These weren't just appointees that were mistreated or high level.
I do not deny. I'm with you 100%. I'm just not on the boat so quickly because.
No. But the reason why I mentioned, my brother, just give me a moment. The reason why I mention this is following along your line of self-preservation. If you're talking about self-preservation as an elected official who understands that the majority of his constituency in most circumstances is women, you are really taking a very big gamble by not paying attention and being on the right side of history on this one.
But we've seen that we've seen that in history, Ed. If we were standing here today, Hillary Clinton would be president of women where, I'm going to take this and I'm not blaming. I'm just saying if people were so inclined to look at their self-interest, and I mean self-interest beyond holding an office. You can hold the office today and be kicked out tomorrow, and you don't have nowhere to go. And that's what I mean, real self-interest. You're talking about the self-interest, I still want to hold this position.
Well, I'm saying
self-interest that I got to feed a family.
No, but I'm following your argument. Your argument is whether or not I think, and maybe I'm wrong, I think whether there is enough political pressure here, whether there's enough political pressure. And I think there is. I think that these elected officials are under enough pressure where they're going to be pressured to have to move forward with this process, whatever the outcome is. I mean, listen, in this recent election in New York City, we have the most women in the New York City Council than we've ever had in the history of this city. That speaks to a certain type of thought process and momentum. I
had to drop a bomb for that because women are taking over now.
Yeah,
and look, I don't disagree that women are taking over, but I would be misled if you put all women in one.
No question.
Right.
Many women are hard on women than even men are. But I think the thoroughness of this report is speaks volumes. I think that Tish was very. She was very careful to make sure that the report was thorough.
You're changing what I'm saying.
Okay.
I'm not saying that she's not thorough. I'm not saying that she didn't dot the I's.
Oh, I'm not saying
that. What I'm saying is that when people make When people make the personal choice in the middle of the night behind closed doors, it may not be as clear as we see it. Like, how dare, like, this is, we got women in places, we've seen this in the national election. We've seen a president win on, not this president, we can go back, whether a gay person lives next door to you. A president won on that. So I'm not so swinging from the vines thinking that whenever I go to protest, I'm always prepared to be the only one out there.
No, and that's why I say to folks, listen, read the report before you jump to conclusions. I think the reason why I mention this report is because I think it runs against certain popular notions, the idea that there's been a rush to judgment, the idea that there's certain cultural norms that are being ignored. I think that's particularly the reason why this, the AG was so careful in making sure that, you know what, to be able to brush back all of those things, I have to make sure that this report is a very well done report, so that, it's not the thought that, oh, I'm doing this because I'm a woman, or we're coming to this conclusion.
But I don't even want you. I don't even want you to. But I don't even want you to interject that.
And the reason why I'm interjecting it too is because it also places an immense amount of pressure over the decision makers.
And I would agree with you in part if I wasn't looking at people that's saying they're not going to get a goddamn vaccine and go to work because there's not enough information out there. So I mean, so I hear what you're saying. Unless all the smart people are just in New York, unless all the smart, reasonable people just live in Albany, and everybody else is ignorant. We got ignorance that go across the board.
Well, on that note, we're almost at the top of the hour, counselors. So sustain both arguments in the court of speaking legally.
Yeah, in that court.
All right, Yana.
So here we are, and clearly this debate is not over. The story is still unfolding. The lesson today is to go and read the report.
Please read the report.
So not just hearing what the news spins or what happens to be on a headline. There's a full-blown report, easily accessible on the internet. You can download it. You can read it for yourself and draw the conclusions that you desire to draw while we watch how the legal system plays out. So be one of those who've had an opportunity to not just talk about it, but be about it, right? So thank you, John. Thank you, Maria. We look forward to hearing your feedback as well. We might have to do another piece on this because this is real time. The whole world is watching what's going on, just like the whole world was watching when we were in the height of the global pandemic of COVID-19. The world was watching when we saw the reactions to the racial unrest that we've been seeing across the country. The world is watching to see what this particular situation will yield with a very popular governor across the country. So this is news happening in real time. When we reach our sunset, our grandchildren's grandchildren be reading about this time. So it'll be interesting to know where you stand and what you can share with your own family and community about your thoughts on what we are witnessing as we are living life in living color in 2021. So thank you for tuning in, for being a part of the show, for sharing the show out, and continue to share. We never know when we'll get that call from Byron Allen, hint, hint, to pick up our Speaking Legally, where the legal meets the cultural, every Wednesday, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I will ask my co-hosts and legal experts to give their final words as we close today's show. Senor Pichardo.
Oh, okay. Well, listen, folks. I hope you found this show fulfilling and educational. As Dr. Brand stated, I want you to definitely look at this report and come up with your own independent conclusions. And I wish you the best. Take care. Be well.
And I just want to tell our audiences that when you listen to this show again, understand that Ed and I, we're walking in step and link. However, we always, as a people, have to be pessimistically optimistic and not caught, oh my God, I didn't see that coming. We got to read between the lines. because, as Ed said, it may come down to several people that were appointed by this person that we don't know, that we can't touch. And this will be an exercise in futility. Hope not, but I wouldn't be surprised. Take care. Be well.
Bye-bye, everyone. See you next week.